nobody is going to argue with themselves. I didn't argue with her. I agreed with her. Okay. And so what's she going to say? No, you're wrong. I was wrong. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. That's not in any way to say that you should be anyone's doormat, or a martyr or self-sacrificial. Nobody is going to buy from you, do business with you, want to be in relationship with you because you need the money. People are going to do business with you or associate with you or what have you because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so.
Welcome to the Performance Initiative Podcast.
Our goal is to provide you and ourselves with the tools to be the best versions of ourselves.
We are your hosts, Dr. Grant Cooper
and Dr. Zinovy Meyler. We just wrapped up a very insightful conversation with Bob Burg.
For over 30 years, Bob Burg has been successfully showing entrepreneurs, leaders, sales professionals how to communicate their value and accelerate their business growth. Now, Bob is the author of the Go Giver book series. The Go Giver original book has sold more than 1 million copies, been translated into over 30 languages. It was rated number 10 on Inc. magazine's list of the most motivational books ever written. Bob is a fantastic communicator. He has a lot of good stories and a lot of good points to tell. It was a great conversation.
He was really, really good about giving actionable points and in a very concise way.
And that's it. I mean, there are concepts that we can all take and immediately put into our lives to hopefully make ourselves a little better. We think you're really going to enjoy this one. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. We're really excited to talk with you. From your books, we can see that you are a wealth of knowledge. You wrote the blockbuster business culture shifting book, Go Giver. The book is a parable that extols 5 laws for success. And it's for success in business, but I think we could all agree that these are principles that lead to success in all aspects of life. So to grossly paraphrase, the laws say that success comes from adding and providing value to other people. And if you can basically put other people's needs first, be your authentic self, and genuinely help other people, then ultimately you'll end up reaping the benefits of other people looking out for you and helping you. And it's a wonderful message. I think that, and by the way, we greatly enjoyed reading the book. It's a must read. I think the challenge that Zinovy and I had as readers is trying to decipher what's real in the message and what might be considered a little Pollyannish or, like too wide-eyed optimistic, but not necessarily real. So our first question is, have you seen this work in the real world? And assuming yes, could you talk about that? And do you think that it's as simple as if you look out for people, then they'll end up looking out for you? Or do you think there's something more spiritual going on that by sending out positivity into the universe will find its way to reward you one way or the other?
Yeah. So, I think those are great questions. And I think the first thing, and I think what's really important for, to clarify or qualify is that there's nothing about being a go-giver that is magical or mystical. Okay. This really, that when you think about the premise, it's that shifting your focus off of yourself, okay, taking the focus off of yourself and focusing on how you can provide exceptional value to others, okay, being the catalyst for, I guess, creating the context for receptivity. Well, why? Why is that so? Are we just saying, do good things and good deeds and great things will happen? No, not at all. And here's what I mean. Nobody is going to buy from you, do business with you, want to be in relationship with you because you need the money or because you have a quota to meet, or because you want them to, or even just because you're a nice person. Okay, people are going to do business with you or associate with you or what have you because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. Okay. So when you can make your focus all about them, doesn't it make sense that those people are going to feel good about you? They're going to feel great about you. They're going to want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to tell the world about you. Be what John David Mann, my co-author, and I call your personal walking ambassadors.
I love
So
that. By the way.
it's not as though it takes a leap of faith to believe that if you do that, you're going to do really well in business, really well in life. It takes more of a leap of faith to believe that that if you're always providing value to others, that you're not going to do well, right?
Right.
So if you look at any company that is sustainably successful, you'll notice that they apply all 5 of the laws that we talk about in the book: the law of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. So yeah, I mean, I love your question. Now, when you say, is there anything in the book that was not realistic? Well, yeah, I'd say the that Joe making that deal within 1 week.
Mm.
That's not real. That's not realistic. That's probably not gonna happen. That's taking, what do they call, a creative license in
Yeah.
order to tie the story up.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But
But
no,
what
everything else is based on, principles that certainly John and I didn't make up. I mean, these are principles that successful people have utilized, since there at least have been market-based economies, right? That some people may not have known that's what they were doing. Some may have done it very intuitively, but yeah, these are things that the sustainably successful people do.
I really love that idea about that having a network is not really about creating win-win scenarios or having people owe you, but it's about creating these ambassadors, right? That you genuinely, have cared for and done things for, so that they will also be looking out for you just because they care for you.
Yeah, and I think that's part of human nature
Yeah,
too, you know? And
yeah.
so, and that's why, we like to say, like, for example, with law number 3, with the law of influence, when we say your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Well, that's not in any way to say that you should be anyone's doormat,
Right.
or a martyr, or self-sacrificial. What it basically means is Joe, the protege in the story, learned from several of the mentors the golden rule of business, of sales, of life, of leadership is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to, and we could add, will want to be in relationship with those people they know, like, and trust. Now, here's the thing: there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way of eliciting those feelings toward you in others than by genuinely moving from that I focus or me focus to that other focus, looking to, as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win.
It's interesting because if you think about just the mental health of people, there's nothing that would make people more miserable than only focusing on themselves. Right?
Ah,
And so
ah,
actually
ah,
taking the
ah.
focus off of yourself and putting on other people, I mean, it's ultimately, it's all about also being your best self and then
Yeah.
also getting the best out of other people.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's where authenticity comes in, and we talk about that in law number 4, which is, the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And in that part of the story, Deborah, who was the mentor in that part, she shares a lesson that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are indeed all very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true authentic core. But when you do, when you show up as yourself day after day, week after week, month after month, well, people feel good about you. They feel very comfortable with you. They feel safe with you. And why wouldn't they? They know who they're getting. And again, another aspect of human nature is that we as human beings, we want to make sense of our world, and this in a world that often doesn't make sense.
Mm.
So we crave that consistency in others, in a world that's often not very consistent. We all know people who are one way one day and totally different the next time we see them. So when you're the same person every time, there's real, they feel that sense of safety, which inspires trust. Now, I think that in today's world, the term authenticity or authentic has almost been hijacked a little bit to mean no boundaries. Just
Hmm.
say or do whatever comes to mind, whatever you want, because you're authentic, so that's okay, and everything else, it doesn't matter. And I respectfully disagree with that. That would be, like the person who says, "Well, I have anger issues and I yell at people a lot, and if I were to act any differently, that wouldn't be authentic of me." And that's malarkey. That's hogwash. It simply means that person has an authentic problem that person needs to authentically work on,
Mhm.
right? In order to become a better, higher, more effective, authentic version of themselves. So I like to define authenticity very simply, and that is acting congruently with your values.
Yes.
And I think when you do that, that's authentic. And if you do this, you're pretty much always on the right track.
For someone who wants to be a giver, would you agree that it requires a certain degree of vulnerability, right? To be able to give and to open up. And what would you say to someone who's a bit more cynical and would be concerned about bad actors taking advantage of them
Sure.
before they become more comfortable in that role of a giver?
Yeah, and it's a wonderful question because you say, well, could you be taken advantage of? Sure, anybody can be taken advantage of. And what I say to people is if you find yourself being taken advantage of a lot, as a pattern. I don't mean every so often. I mean, live 70 to 90 to 100 years, you're going to be taken advantage of by somebody at some time. I mean, that's life. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a pattern of being taken advantage of. And if someone is like that, then I would say it's not because they're a giver that happens. It's not because they're a nice person that happens. It's because they're doing something that's creating the environment for people to take advantage of them. Okay. Because again, there's nothing about being a go-giver that's congruent with being taken advantage of. So I would ask the person to kind of go deep into what it is that might be causing that to happen. And typically it's on an unconscious level because I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, I wonder who I can find to take advantage of me today." But there's always a payoff though to anything we do. So there's some people who find themselves constantly being taken advantage of, and that's sort of again, unconsciously, their excuse for not being as successful as they could be. Well, I would be, but everybody takes advantage of me, or it's a way of getting some attention, as that nice, wonderful person who's always just being taken advantage of. Or they may not have the tools to know how to notice when there's someone who might be doing something like that. So whatever it is, I always encourage that person to kind of go deep and question their premises and discover why it is that's happening. Now, when we and for the person who feels, well, gosh, if I'm giving to people, aren't I going to be taken advantage of? There's no reason that should be the case because when we talk about giving, we're talking about providing value to people's lives. How do you do that? There's many ways to do that, whether it's just being a friend, whether it's listening to that person, whether it's introducing them to a person, whether it's sharing some knowledge. It doesn't mean you need to put yourself in a position where you're hurting yourself. But if you ever do find that someone maybe is starting to take advantage, remember, you can always notice that and you don't have to continue, right? And so, yeah, so
Like having
it
some boundaries, right? You sort of have
well,
boundaries and you say, well,
yes.
this is outside of that, so I'm going to move.
Oh, absolutely. It's by the way, it's one reason why when you do business with someone, why I'm a big believer in written agreements. Okay, well, why? It's not that I don't trust the other person. It's not that I think they're going to do something wrong, but people have memories that aren't always very accurate. And so when we've, let's say, been hired to do certain things and that person, asks for more than what has been agreed upon. Now, we can certainly do whatever that is if it's something we want to do, if we want to bring extra value, or if we want to, that's fine, as long as it comes from a position of strength. But if that person begins to expect it and it's not something that we feel good about doing, we need to be able to, always in a kind, tactful, diplomatic way, remind them of the boundaries of the agreement and share with them that, this is not something I'd be comfortable doing based on what we had agreed to. And if they say, well, but I don't remember that. Now you have something you can, again, gently and diplomatically share with them to see. Now they might say, well, yeah, but I really want you to do this, this extra thing. Now you have a couple choices here. You can say, while it's not something that was part of the agreement, I'm happy to explore those extra tasks or whatever it would be. That would be an additional fee in order to do that. And if you'd like to discuss that, absolutely, we can certainly do so. Boom. Now you're, again, giving them an opportunity to do so. Or you could just, you have the right to just say, I appreciate that. It's not something that I would want to do, but thank you anyway for asking.
Yes.
So again, as long as we handle it in a way that honors the other person while still respecting our own boundaries, that's fine.
Friends, we hope you're finding value in the content. If you're enjoying what you're watching, please consider hitting the like button, help us with our YouTube algorithm, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on the notification button to stay up to date with everything going on in the channel.
And you mentioned tact in your response, and you do mention it in your writing. Can you speak to that? Why is that important?
Well, my dad always defined tact as the language of strength. And I always loved that definition because to me, it can take a lot of strength to think about what we're going to say before we say it, especially when someone says or does something that, you know, may not be in alignment with how we would want to handle a situation or how we would communicate with someone. So it takes a lot of strength to go into that, to kind of reframe and be able to handle it that way, to respond rather than react, right? So, but a definition of tact might be uh, the ability to communicate an idea to someone that they ordinarily would not be receptive to, but in a way that causes them to not only be defensive and resistant to our idea, but to be open and more accepting to it. And
So not
that's
to spark their defenses. It's kind of an interesting concept because I've seen some and etiquette and tact are not necessarily the same thing,
right.
but they may have some similar implications where it's trying not to either offend the other person,
Sure.
respect their wishes, and also not raise their defenses. And it's interesting that in some references I've seen etiquette being looked at as something that is a way of keeping people out. Well, like etiquette, when they look at like Queen's etiquette and different layers of society, where it seems that the premise of etiquette is really very much on the giver side, where it's you're giving somebody respect, you're giving somebody the ability to hear you without either offending them or raising their defenses. So do you think that etiquette and tact are they're different concepts in your mind, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of distant cousins in a way. I mean, I
Yes.
think of etiquette more as, how you hold your fork, and, where the knife is set up and so forth. And, it's a politeness,
Hmm.
it's a courtesy, and that's very, very, important. I think of tact more as something, but again, it always comes down to how you define terms.
Yeah.
So I may be defining etiquette in a way much different than you're defining etiquette, And so so we always want to make sure that we're defining things, the same way. I think as tact more in the way that you're communicating an idea, or you're communicating with another person in such a way to help them feel good about themselves, genuinely good about themselves, as well as the situation and about you. And meanwhile, but doing so in a way that you're able to attain the results that you want.
Something that you have in another book that you have that I really enjoyed, which was turning
Yep.
adversaries into allies,
Thank you.
is is if you want to disagree with someone, um, and you want them to, be responsive to it, one of the tools that you suggest, and correct me if I have this a little off, but is starting off with a statement that agrees with them, right?
Sure.
That just to put ourselves on the same page, the same footing. I agree. Like, well, we're both after this, but
Sure.
have you considered it from this perspective, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, and it's also, and I think I'd had a couple of examples in there about someone who, I think I one of the examples was at the airline ticket counter where
Yes.
the person tells you that this is gonna, cost an extra $75 because this and that and this and that, and they're telling you all the reasons. And the first thing you do is just agree with them. Oh, absolutely. In fact, the person on the phone last night told me it would be an extra $75 to make the change. And so when you do that, I call it the law of agreement, which says nobody is going to argue with themselves. So, I didn't argue with her. I agreed with her. Okay. And so what's she going to say? No, you're wrong. I was wrong. Yeah. And right. And now and then once you have that, what you've done is you've reframed the situation from one of two adversaries to one of two allies who are now just looking for a solution. So now, the next thing you might say is, now what she had told me was that although it would normally be an extra $75, because I have, and then whatever the reason was, there. So you first agree with that person. That way you're disarming that person in a very genuine way so that this person's not defensive, and then going after the solution. If you just go right to the solution, that person, still is, in
Yeah.
defense mode, and they're going to be much less likely to want to work with you.
Something that comes through a lot in the turning adversaries into allies book is that there's so many good uh, tidbits of advice and about like how to actually put it into practice about smiling and sending handwritten notes. And
Right.
something that struck me was it's a lot of it seems like old school gentlemanly behavior that and it struck me that a lot of that has gotten lost, and simply by doing those kinds of sort of what would you call it, like formally basic norms, right?
Yeah.
You kind of
Yeah.
stand
Yeah.
out because
Yeah.
people have kind of lost that. And I was wondering, A, if you agree with that, but B, if like where did we lose that? Why is it so? How come that message resonates in a way that it seems like unfamiliar? Like, oh right, that's a great idea. Like, it's nice to be nice. It's nice to show respect and make sure people feel appreciated. And you say thank you, and not just thank you, but I appreciate you. Where did that get lost along the way?
It's hard to say. It does seem as though it has though, and which makes it even easier to distinguish yourself and separate yourself from everybody else, because now you become one of the few people, the relatively few people who's doing that.
Yeah,
And so it makes it so that although there's a lot more noise in the world now, it's very easy to stand out when you do those little, polite things.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, good. Yeah. Something that you talk about is mentorship. How does one go about finding a good mentor and cultivating that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, and mentorship is important because a good mentor can really cut your learning curve by years. Um, and I think the just because now with the internet and with social media and so forth, we get a chance to meet people that we may never have had access to previously, and you can really pretty much ask anyone for advice. But I think what happens is a lot of people, they go to that next step before taking the first one, and they'll approach somebody who they admire. And by the way, it could be in person, or again, or it could be social media, it could be someone, however. But they will right away ask that person to be their mentor. And, a mentor protege relationship is just that. It's a relationship, and it takes time to develop. And so when someone just approaches someone and says, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" I've heard people analogize that to, it's sort of like asking somebody for the marriage before asking them out on a first date.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so if you want this person to be your mentor, the chances are a lot of other people probably do as well, and they only have a limited amount of time and energy to be able to do that sort of thing. So just coming right out without there being, assuming that there's no relationship there yet, okay,
Right.
and just asking that person to be your mentor could come across as maybe a little entitled, or just, it's not something that's going to distinguish you from others. So I would approach it in a little bit different way. And it doesn't mean you can't ask that person, but I would maybe say, I know you're very busy, and if this is something you just don't have time to do, or for whatever reason would rather not, I'll absolutely understand. I'm wondering if I might ask you one or two very specific questions.
Yeah.
Now, by reframing it like this, you've done a few things. One, you've approached in a more respectful way. You're communicating. You realize it's a big ask. Okay. You've also, number two, you've given that person an out or back door, and this is very important. You said, if for whatever reason you would rather not, I'll absolutely understand. And what this says to the person is, okay, this person respects my time, right? They're not gonna just, take up a lot of my time, and with a lot of nonsense, and so forth. So that's, again, it's just another add-on, if you will. But here's the key part, is that you didn't just ask, again, for them to mentor you, which is sort of like saying, "Hey, would you share with me 40 years of your experience, even though you don't really know me from a hole in the wall?" But you asked, "May I ask you one or two very specific questions?" This says to this person, okay, this guy or this gal, they know what they want. They have an agenda. They're not gonna just want to pick my brain, and they have some, right, and it's not gonna take a lot of time, and it's gonna be a very fruitful session, and it's got right.
Right.
Okay, so they're typically, and again, not always, but people are people. You don't know, but most people are gonna say, "Sure, go ahead. How can I help you?" Now, one of the keys is to make sure you've researched this person so thoroughly that you don't ask them anything that you could have found the answer to, online by doing your research. But the key is, once you've asked a couple of these questions and you haven't taken up a lot of their time, but they've given you some great information, and you thank them profusely, you let them know that you're going to put that to use right away. May I keep in touch from time to time, and apprise you of my progress? And they're going to say, "Yes, of course, please do." Okay, now, the very next thing I'm going to suggest is to, once you either leave them, if it's in person, or get off the phone, or a Zoom call, whatever it happens to be, is send them a short, personalized, handwritten thank you note. Okay, not an email, not a text; those are all fine, but nothing replaces that handwritten thank you note. And it simply says, "Dear Mr. So and so, or Ms. So and so," or first name if that's how it's been, "Thank you. It was an absolute honor to speak with you. I so appreciate your sharing your time and wisdom with me. I look forward to applying it right away. As mentioned, I'll follow up, and, let you know how things, what have you.
Right.
Best regards." I name, put it in an envelope, hand stamp it, not a meter machine, but a regular stamp, and send it out right away. That's going to be so very impressive to that person, because it shows you took the time, you followed up, you followed through. Now, I would also, um, discover, and you can do this very easily just by researching them again, or online. But if not, you can ask their administrative assistant, find out what their favorite charitable cause is. Okay, and make so it doesn't have to be anything big, but a small donation to that in their name. It'll get back
Mm.
to them. And again, you're not doing it to kiss up to the person. You're doing it just to, again, show appreciation, show respect, communicate that you want to add or bring value to them, even though you're, not in a position to do it as much as they can do for you. It's still right. Now, the next a couple weeks later, a few weeks later, you may follow up with them again. You have another question.
Would you mention to them that you had done that? That no,
You
you
won't have,
just
you
make
won't
the
have
donation.
no, you won't have to make because if you make it in their name, they'll be notified.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, by the charity. It will say so and so made a donation of so and so in your name. Um, and so, so you follow up with them next, and it may turn into a mentor protege relationship, or it might be that's the one time or two times you're going to speak to that person, and you're going to take the same approach with someone else, and eventually, again, you might end up having that relationship, that Tuesdays with Morrie relationship. You may not. It may just be different people at different times. What I would suggest to people is, follow this kind of system for doing so, but don't be attached to the result. It
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to be that one person.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really, I mean, it's almost exactly the proverbial foot in the door,
Yeah,
right? Getting
sure.
just starting the relationship and then
Exactly.
treating it with respect and
Yeah,
care.
exactly.
Yeah. And then those handwritten notes used to be so common, right? Like I grew up writing handwritten notes, but I
Sure.
can't remember the last time.
Well, our moms always taught us, you
Yeah.
go to a party or you eat over someone's house or, whatever, you send a thank you note or, what have you. You get gifts for a birthday, you send thank you note. Yeah, that kind of, and it's funny though, that even back then, it was still not a as common as we might think. It was still always very appreciated
Sure. Yeah.
when you sent, especially when you met a prospective customer or you met someone at a networking event or when you send a thank you note. And, I mean, people really,
Always
you'd hear
appreciate
6
it.
months later that they kept them right on their desk and
Yeah.
that right? And
Yeah.
I'd get thank you notes for sending thank you notes. This is 40 years ago. But today, when you have emails and text, even more so,
Right.
that, you send a hand, and especially if you're connected with someone online and you've had some back and forth online and you send a handwritten personalized thank you note for something,
Yeah.
or, they maybe got a promotion or something and you send a handwritten thank you note of congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, this just absolutely makes their day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's so simple, but so effective.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, we have to let you go soon, but there was something I was hoping to ask you. In your book, you talk about the Ben Franklin method for winning people over. Do you remember that? Could you describe that?
Yeah, well, first of all, Ben Franklin was one of the very best. He had a ton of methods for winning people over. I mean, this guy was someone who, and he really worked on his people skills because that was not a strength of his at first. And he talks about this in his classic, The Autobiography, which he wrote over a period of years, originally for his son James. And fortunately, the book got published and has been it's an amazing, wonderful book. But he knew that his people skills had to he could debate people. He could use the Socratic method all day long, and he could and he could but people he could convince people, but he was having trouble persuading them, right? Because they didn't feel good about it. They didn't feel good about him. So he realized he had to. So he actually became a very tactful, very very effective communicator. But one of the things he did, one of his methods was that it's always been known that if you do something for someone, they're much more likely to want to do something for you, and there's truth to that. In fact, Robert Cialdini, in his classic Influence, Science and Practice, and his updated version, The Psychology of Persuasion, talks about the law of reciprocity. About it's a natural, but there's something stronger than that that Ben Franklin discovered. And that is, if you could get someone to do something for you, they were much more likely to feel good about you. Now, this has to do with the law of consistency, which Cialdini also talked about. And that is, people want to be and feel consistent with what they do. Um, and so if somebody does something for you, it must be because, well, you're a good, deserving person. Right? So the story goes that Franklin had someone who was in another part of it, was in the Pennsylvania House. And this person did not really like Ben Franklin and would very rarely even acknowledge him or speak with him. And Ben Franklin saw him as someone who, was going to really accumulate some power in the House. And Franklin needed to make this guy an ally instead of having him as an adversary. So Ben Franklin, discovering that this person owned a certain book that Franklin did actually want to read, sent a messenger over to ask if he might lend Franklin the book. So the person did. And I guess that's just politeness. That would be etiquette, right? Doing that, right? And so Franklin read the book, sent some, notes back on it with a nice thank you note and so forth, and sent it back to the person. As Ben Franklin said, from that point on, every time that person saw him, he acknowledged him as though they were great friends, and they actually became great friends for the rest of their lives. So it was actually, instead of doing something for someone and that person feeling like they owed him, it was this person did something for Ben and then felt good about Ben, because I certainly wouldn't lend a book to somebody who I didn't like.
Right. It's a great example of cognitive dissonance, right? You have to change your attitude to
Right.
Yeah, that's great. I think we got to let him go.
I think we have.
We have about 17 pages of questions, but maybe we can pick this up another time. We really appreciate you taking the time. This was really great.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. Y'all have been fantastic hosts and have made me feel very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Friends, thank you for your attention. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation. If you find value, please remember to hit the like button to help us with our YouTube algorithm. Consider subscribing to the channel and turn on the notifications so you can stay up to date with everything going on with the channel. And please leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought about the show and also what you'd like to hear about in the future.